I would like to introduce this year's alumni speaker, Mr. Cal Dietz. Cal is a 1996 graduate from the University of Findlay with a bachelor's degree in health and physical education. He was a member of 2 national champion football teams and a national champion wrestling team. He also earned a master's degree in kinesiology from the University of Minnesota. Cal has been the head Olympic strength and conditioning coach at the University of Minnesota since 2000. He has worked with a variety of Golden Gopher athletes and currently works with men's and women's hockey, men's and women's golf, men's swimming, baseball, and track and field. He also founded and currently chairs the Sport Biomechanics Interest Group at Minnesota and is a member of the Big Ten Committee related to anabolic and ergogenic aids. He is active in advancing the strength and conditioning profession, having given numerous lectures, published scientific papers, and is an author of a book on speed and explosive strength development. Cal and his wife Karen have 2 children, Tatum and Brody. And again, it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Cal Dietz.
First of all, I want to thank everyone that was involved in bringing me back here. When I got the call, it was absolutely fascinating for me to be able to come back here, how this has changed. I believe I was here about 5 to 7 years ago, and it's a pretty awesome place. You know, the college itself is bricks and mortar, but what people really don't understand is that what makes this place is the faces out here and the people that have helped me. I would say I was probably a narrow-minded young man when I came here from Shelby, Ohio, just down the road about an hour and a half. And the people that I got to experience, I don't know if they realize the impact they actually make on your lives during this time. And being an athlete was part of that because I was forced to practice basically year-round with 2 sports that I competed in. And at times it was tough being an athlete because I'd have to study and then go to class, and ultimately it became a struggle to, I'd leave wrestling practice, we'd run in the morning at 6, then we'd go to wrestling practice at 4, then I'd have to go to my evening classes, and then we'd have to go after evening classes to train again some days. And to be able to focus that way, I began to realize actually once I became a strength coach and digging into the physiology that some of the things I actually dig into now is the understanding of the sympathetic system and the parasympathetic system in the human body. And I realized actually I became probably sympathetic dominant, and your ability to function as an organism is actually reduced and actually learn is what we found. So actually we dug into that, and I'll get into this a little bit later, but some of the things that I do is actually switch my athletes over from a sympathetic state to a parasympathetic state, which is a calming state. Because my athletes, they also too found that when they leave a workout or a training session, they were unable to focus in class. But anyway, I'll get more into that later. But getting back to what's here, I mean, what a great place for somebody to come and continue their education. I reference this place all the time, being part of the national championships. I left here and then went to the University of Minnesota where I did my graduate work in motor development kinesiology. And being there, it was a tough route, but I knew I wanted to be a strength conditioning coach. When I say a tough route, I didn't make enough money, and at the time I was 23, I realized, I probably shouldn't call my parents anymore. So, and I mean, some kids maybe never have that time in their life, but anyway, I did. So I tell people I lost 80 pounds during that time frame because I didn't have enough money to eat, so I would eat some nutrition bars, but over the 2 years that I was there to get my degree. And also I worked 60 hours a week while I got my master's. So my path to being a strength coach, there's at times I'm going, is this really what I want to do? Work 60 hours a week, go to night class, only be able to study on Sundays for my class on Thursday. It was definitely a journey that was something, to say the least, difficult. But you know what? So was my praxis here. So was getting my degree here for me because of everything I was involved in. And I had understanding professors, people that would make accommodations at times for travel, but I remember it was something that I valued. When I left this place, it was very difficult, even though I knew I was going to somewhere that was very, to say the least, a new step in my life. And, so in giving this lecture, I lecture around the country on physiology and strength conditioning, but I was like, well, what would a student from here want to hear? And you know what? One of the big things that I've learned over the years, especially with the elite coaches that I've worked with, and not only do I work with elite athletes, I work with elite professors, I work with people at the top of their field. And you know what? One of the biggest things is you actually have to, and I actually now I call it a debriefing. I debrief myself, and it sounds a little bit military-ish, but ultimately you sit there and you go, you know what? Even the years that, let's say, again, I've been a part of 9 national championships at the University of Minnesota, 28 Big Ten titles, and it's like, even the years that I had the most success, I still question my methods and what I've done, okay? And then if you can get a group of people to debrief on a subject or some task, even after, maybe you got an A, but how could it have been better, okay? I even asked my athletes to do that for themselves, to make sure, are you doing everything you needed to do this season to make sure that you were the best? And with that, you have to question yourself. And then I also debrief my coaches, which, you know, some coaches in this world, the egos, let's say the least, especially in athletics, are pretty high. That doesn't always go over well. But with that, the next step was, you know, I think the next biggest thing was continuous learning. Okay? Over the years, I realized I didn't know as much as I thought. Got a great education here. But when you really dive into something, you actually can go down, let's say, the rabbit hole and maybe never come out, okay? My library now has extended to roughly about $200,000. Now, I don't pay for all those books, but I scan them in, so they're in my digital library, okay? They're referenced, they're searched, they're all documented. I have, and then my biomechanics interest group, in regards to keeping, you know, smart, I say smart people, but around me. But I would start this interest group and I had engineers show up. And I can remember one of the projects we did, we had a 9-camera system from, well, I think it was only 2 places in the country, or in the, this part of the world had it. It was, I believe it was NASA and the University of Minnesota. We had a machine that told us some things about training, 9-camera motion analysis machine, and I couldn't run it, but the engineering students could. So what we did was hooked it up, and it actually became an intricate part of my training method, some of the things that this told me. So my point is that everything you learn, okay, here, you need to build on, and then try to expand your horizons to multidiscipline approach. Okay, so I'm a strength coach, physical education teacher, went into motor development. And then came out and I went and found a doctor who, in my research, I realized the limiting factor in many enzyme reactions within the human body are based upon thermodynamics. So then I went and found a professor who had 3 doctorate degrees from the Soviet Union. He, I believe it was an MD, a PhD, multiple PhDs, and one was in biophysics at the Institute of Biophysics in Moscow. He was the last human to sign off onto going into space for the astronauts' health. His name was Viktor Khrushchev. And then he oversaw Chernobyl. He was the chief medical officer at Chernobyl. Okay? So when you have this person, then he actually helped me with many issues we have in thermodynamics at the athletes level to make sure that they can keep working, because eventually the body shuts down because of thermodynamics in many actions that take place. And then the next area I got into, which was the activation of understanding the brain. I became to realize that many areas of human limitation is actually in the brain, which brought me into some other fields of, like, I don't even know if it's a field here yet, but the Soviets termed it sociobiology. So it's the function of the human organism into its social setting, okay, and how it responds to that social setting. Now, then I was able to find a doctor that was actually studying ways that this certain vibration therapy actually affects the brain. So I was able to test my athletes, for example, and I found out that many times when they were overtrained, their center of gravity began to sway because we'd have these force plates. And what happened is that center of sway would actually pull in when we actually gave this activation therapy. And when I say activation therapy, it is essentially certain tones that the body responds to. Now, getting back to the parasympathetic and sympathetic aspects, with this particular device that pumps these tones into your brain, we're actually able to take an athlete who was working out and switch them from a sympathetic state to a parasympathetic state, instantly resting them. Okay, their blood pressure drops, oxygenation levels go up, and they actually start digesting their food. And then they can actually learn and function at a higher level than if they were in the sympathetic state. Which, with his help, became to realize, a lot of my research now, and I just finished a book on training, but that's more training. The next steps are essentially the biochemical aspects of how humans function within their environment and in that training environment. So the next step we realize is that if any of you ever get to see my book, you'll realize that the key to everything I do is actually stress. So I stress the organism. And then I have to find out what function is each organ in the stress that I'm applying does. And then actually we've dug into the pharmacology to help that organ recover and function even at a higher level, which then there's a problem. So as a strength coach, again, I'm a P major here, we've dug into the neuropharmacology of how the brain responds to particular aspects of training and function. And my biggest point with all this is that, as my library grows, I have so many books in there now, I actually have people that read them and summarize them, and then we sit down and we talk about those. And my biggest point with this is, if you want to get to the highest level, I think there's probably a little bit of obsessive compulsiveness that exists, okay? But yet, if you just take a multidisciplinary approach and maybe look at every different field that you can be involved with, okay, that's relatively close to what you currently do. And some of you will be business owners. Maybe you have to work on business. Some of you will most likely be, top in your field, and maybe it's physical therapy. Well, I know many physical therapists that go out into the manual therapy world, that maybe go into the functional neurology aspect. So the biggest thing that I can say is you can never stop learning. And nowadays, instead of going to the library and digging things up with the internet and the social media and blogs, you can do many, many great things. For example, as a strength coach, I come across many problems in, let's say, the physical therapy world, and I call on physical therapists and athletic trainers on a daily basis. One of the things is a lot of the glute problems that we found in my advanced athletes actually, it's not a weak glute, it's actually an SI joint that has shifted a little bit, has come out of place, which is hindering the glute from functioning correctly. So then if we can get the glute back into place, then the whole body is structurally more sound. Now, many of these problems that these athletes have, we're finding it seems to be all structural. And then sometimes that people are treating the symptoms to these versus actually finding the actual problem. So my point is with this is it took me many years to find this out, but I had a doctor show me one day where we had a kid that an elite athlete, Olympic caliber thrower, who was having knee pain because of his glute. And I didn't disagree that the glute was out or something was wrong with the glute, but ultimately the knee pain was because of the glute, but it was because of the SI joint that was inhibiting the glute from firing correctly. So then, these are things that we come across, but you have to associate yourself with the right people. You can never stop learning, okay? Just because once you're here, you have a great foundation, but you need to build on that foundation to make sure you reach the highest levels of learning. And that's the hopes that I can deliver the message today. Like I said, you have to be a little bit obsessive compulsive, but most of the people I deal with on a daily basis are. My athletes, they actually become, that's another key point. Maybe the people you're dealing with, you have to understand them from their emotional intelligence perspective. Many of the athletes are so single-minded that I deal with. They don't want to watch the news when they're a professional athlete. They don't want to do anything else but what's going to make them better. And some are completely different. But it just takes so then you have to handle the people, every person you come across, you actually have to handle them different in a different way. But ultimately, the hopes is that, I guess the biggest thing that I could deliver today would be question yourself, make sure that you always think, and even if you think you're correct and perfect, how can I make something better? This has been my standard of trying to progress myself, and then you can never stop learning. For example, I gave a lecture and I talked about how I read a Buddhist monk book on meditation. Well, in restoration methods, the Buddhist monk, they realized that you couldn't reach the highest level of meditation until you actually got your tongue to relax at the highest levels, okay? So then during restoration methods, we actually found blood pressure was reduced when as soon as the athlete's workout was over, and we put them into the restorative state. If they had learned to relax their tongue, this happened faster and they calmed themselves down. So this is a method that we use. Now, I was reading a book on Buddhist monks and their meditation methods, okay? So what I'm saying is there's so many physiology books, there's so many different books I use, but ultimately the hopes is that you actually pull from multiple disciplines. And don't be afraid to reference back to people that you've learned from here, okay? This is a very valuable tool. Professors in your past, my advisor at Minnesota, I always call him and he calls me right back because he's willing to help because I was one of his students, okay? Keep in touch with the people of your past because they're part of the reason that you are where you're at. And I guess in closing, again, I can't thank the people in this community in the university that does so much for this place because I know the impact it made on my life. It gave me a direct path to meeting my wife, very special person to me, obviously. It's our 10-year anniversary today. She doesn't hold me accountable for not being there. She understands. She was an Olympic gold medalist in 1998 in women's ice hockey and a silver medalist in 2000. I wasn't sure if I was marrying her after 2002 when she got the silver, but I was begging her to marry me, actually, to be honest with you. And then now we have 2 children that are very special, but ultimately, this was the foundation. This was actually a place that my path changed in life and has went in many directions. Now, there are many failures in my life, but the successes are too much for me to account. And I just appreciate the people that work here, that keep building, because the impact that I know that'll take place in the young people's life. And are there any questions? They asked me, does anybody have any questions? I think we're going to the awards banquet after this, or talking about awards. But anyway, if there's no questions, I'll be here afterwards if you're interested in chatting, okay? Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.